Hello and welcome to Your Questions Answered with Father Gruner. I'm John Veneri. In this program, we take your questions. Father Gruner answers them. We talk about them, have discussions. Please continue to send us these questions at questions@thefatimacenter.com. We have a question today about what's called annulments. I'll just read what it says. Is a person who has received an annulment from a diocesan tribunal free to marry again? Is there any doubt about the validity of a subsequent marriage? I have always believed that one could only enter into a second marriage if the first partner was deceased. So I think it comes down to an understanding of what the word annulment means.
Yes, well, I think that, so an annulment is not a divorce, okay? So, but before we even talk about what annulment is, we have to talk about what marriage is. Okay, so a marriage, sacramentally speaking, John, I know you know this and you can perhaps fill in things I might leave out, but the idea is that the sacrament of marriage actually takes place, the priest is not the minister of the sacrament. The priest is the official witness. Now, the priest for saying Mass or absolving from sins or baptizing, he is the minister. But in the case of marriage, it's not the priest who is the minister of the sacrament. It's each person administering to the couple. So the whole idea is that marriage is quite unique, is that it's a contract. What I mean by contract is, I don't want to sound either cold or commercial, but a contract, even for let's say no money at all, is, John, I agree to give you this in return for I want you to come to my house tomorrow and bring over a cup of tea for me. Okay, so
I have to sign a contract for that? I get the idea.
But the idea is it's an agreement. A
Yeah.
contract is an agreement,
Yeah.
but a contract is a more formal agreement. So I mean,
You sign a contract with someone who's going to put a new roof on your house.
Yeah, well, and that's a commercial. But I want to leave contract out of being commercial.
Okay,
for the moment.
all right.
The idea is it's not whatever. It's certainly an example of a contract. If you put a new roof on your house, and the supplier says, "I'll do this, and you give me this much money, and you give me access to the house and this and that, and I'll do this for such and such." But the whole idea is that you're agreeing to something, I'm agreeing to something, and we're making the exchange, and we're fulfilling our end of the contract by doing what we said we're going to do. But in the case of marriage, it's just also a contract. It's not a commercial contract. It is an agreement between a man and a woman. It has to be a man and a woman. Mm-hmm. But so the man and the woman who are not married already, so that's the first thing, and that they are capable of marriage. So a child, for example, 10 years old or 5 years old, cannot marry, not because they're humans, but they're not capable of marriage yet. So they can't get married yet because they need to be adult humans, if I might say, first of all. So the whole point I'm getting at is that the sacrament of marriage is the contract between the man and the woman to accept. The woman accepts the man as her husband, the man accepts the woman as his wife, and there's two people in the contract. There's a third person in the contract, and the third person is God. And God says, you can't get married to each other unless you agree to my fundamental terms of this contract, which is that your every act of procreation is open to children. Now, whether God wants to send you children or doesn't send you children, that's God's choice. Mm-hmm. But the act of procreation has to be open to that. So if a person gets married, for example, goes through a ceremony, if a man and a woman goes through a ceremony saying, I'm going to marry X, and X is going to marry Y, but X is saying to himself all along, but I'm not going to have any children, I'm going to do whatever it takes for me not to have any children, while enjoying the benefits of the act of procreation. Well, that is not a marriage. Because God says, I will not bless that. It's not according to my terms. If X gets married to Y, in another case, and says, I'll marry Y and I'll marry X, but if it doesn't work out in 5 years, I'm going to get a divorce. Well, God also hasn't blessed that marriage because the marriage is forever. So if in their hearts and their consent, they've already said, I'm not going to accept any children, although I'll use the Marriage Act, or I'm not going to marry for life, even though, okay, I made a bad choice. X wasn't what I thought he was, or wasn't what I thought he was. The point is, if we have made that contract already with those terms in our own, we have not been married in the first place. And why am I bringing this up? Is because in those cases, there was never a marriage, even though they went through a ceremony, even though they said I do, they didn't really mean I do, and therefore there never was a contract and a meeting of minds and hearts to agree to something that was also in conformity with God's conditions and terms for a marriage. And therefore, what an annulment,
null.
It never took place.
Yeah.
And what the annulment is to declare, upon examining the issues and questions coming up, it comes out that this person said, "Oh well, if in 5 years it doesn't work, I'm going to get a divorce." Well, then it's clear there never was and the difference is why you have priests on these marriages is to say, to ask the right questions. Did you really have this intention, or did you have some other intention? Because after a while, the marriage is it's a blessing, but it also has its crosses. And so you need the graces for the marriage. So if a marriage breaks apart, it could be because they're not being faithful to grace, but also could be because they haven't had the grace in the first place, because there never was a marriage, because God didn't give them the blessing, and therefore they don't have this, because they broke one of the fundamental rules in the very act of getting married. So all an annulment is declaring that marriage never took place in the first place. Yes, they went through a ceremony. Yes, they said, "I do." Yes, they lived as man and wife for how many years? But no, there was not an actual contract, an agreement of a fundamental point on these fundamental points. Now, I'm not going through the whole thing,
Sure.
but I'm just trying to get the point is that if a tribunal does its job properly, and it discovers that there are grounds such as not accepting children, just we're going to use the Marriage Act, but we're not going to accept children, and that was their intention from day one, from the time they agreed, then there was no marriage. And I mean, if they think I'm making this up, they can look up Casti Connubii, that's by Pius XI in 1930, his encyclical. He makes it very clear. There's never, and not that he's the only one. It's been taught by that in the church all the time.
He was just pronouncing in his encyclical what the teaching is.
And the same thing, he says the same thing about if a person says they're going to get married, it's also in Casti Connubii. So those are not the only cases, but those are two cases which are classic, for which, say, a diocesan tribunal could say, if they have the authority, say, after examining the witnesses under oath and everything else, and we've discovered there's no marriage. And it certainly can be, you can be as certain as anything on if those are the two cases, But I mean, and there's other grounds for annulment besides. But the point I'm trying to get at here is a person says, I always believe that a person only in a second marriage, the first partner died. If you were married to the first partner, you're absolutely correct. That is, if you truly had a marriage with your husband and your wife, then you can't get married to anybody else. You can't have a divorce. I mean, for better or worse, for better, great, or for worse, you're stuck. But anyway, that's where it is. But in the case of if they never had a marriage in the first place, then there's grounds for annulment. Now, I can't say, well, since I had this, I self-administer to myself. Okay, well, I declare I'm annulled. No, we have to go.
Well,
through.
God is joined together. Nobody can put asunder, including the partners themselves.
Yes. So I don't know if that's answered the question.
Well, I think, too, the question comes up because right now we're going through a period in church history where there was a tremendous amount of abuse regarding annulments.
Yes.
Where they're just, they're coming up with fanciful reasons and it's really just a Catholic divorce. Yeah. And so that's why.
I mean, of course, it's not Catholic, but it's
it's a figure of speech. Yeah. I know of a woman who went to, I won't even say what diocese it is, but she went to see the vicar general of the diocese, who's ever the head of the tribunal.
Sure.
And of course, there's a number of reasons why that make one eligible for annulment. And she sat down, and the Monsignor sat down. He threw the paper at her and said, "Pick a reason." In other words, just you want to make this happen, we'll make it happen. Yeah. And and Monsignor Smith, I love this story. Monsignor Smith, who was a moral theologian at Dunwoody Seminary, he said he was talking to another theologian who was much more progressive, and they were at a restaurant.
So-called progressive, but anyway.
He was a modernist, and this priest says to Monsignor Smith, I've never seen a marriage that couldn't be annulled.
Boy.
And Monsignor Smith said, "Don't say that in public. Yeah. That's stupid. Shall we start with your parents? Do you know what that makes you?" Yeah. So there's been a lot of abuse in annulments. So even dealing with the diocese on these points, one has to be very careful that they're following the rules of the church.
The real whole thing is this, that obviously if they're giving an annulment on the basis of solid grounds, and I've given two, I'm not giving all of them, then the annulment would be valid. If the annulment, if it's done for some specious reason or done in this place that says, "Oh, take a reason, I'll fill it out and get you the annulment," that's obviously they haven't got the right attitude. It's a very serious job. I mean, it's enough work. I mean, it's a sacrifice. It's a cross like marriage. Also, why would some priest put a soul in hell because he meets two people who are not happy with their marriage with each other, and I'm just going to give you a divorce. I'll fill out the proper forms, all the rest of it. I mean, it's a serious business. Why am I going to put myself in hell because of their mistakes? I mean, you know, I'm not refusing to do the due diligence.
And you feel sympathy for people.
Yeah, but I mean, these priests are taking the attitude. I mean, I'm sorry, but if I were their confessor and you're not going to repent, I'm certainly not going to bet on your chances of getting to heaven.
So anyway, but getting back to the whole business of the annulment, that if the church has established that I don't know the exact term for granting an annulment is not quite.
Well, the grounds for annulment.
Grounds for annulment, that the grounds for annulment exist. And that's what the word means, that the marriage was null to begin with, so there was no marriage.
It's a declaration that the marriage never took place.
You're right.
I mean, I know of a case, and I presume all of them are dead today. I know certainly one partner's dead, but the woman in this case, and I don't even know her name, and I've never met her, but I know the details of what I'm trying to get at is that she did not understand what marriage was in the first place. I mean, you know, I'm sure there's men who can be as ignorant like that, but in this case it was a woman. And so when she said, "I do," she didn't even know what she was agreeing to. Mm-hmm. I mean, subsequent events brought that out, and her marriage was annulled at the highest level of the church about 10 years later. My point only being that every case can be different, but there's no way that everybody doesn't understand. But there can be some unusual cases, but they're very, for example, one of the things is, a contract, just make it very simple. If you're going to give me this paper, John, and you're saying, I'm giving it to you, I have to, the assumption is that this paper belongs to you, and you can give it to me, okay? But if you are in fact married to somebody else, you cannot say, I can marry you, because I'm already married to someone else. So if a person, and there are cases, you know, in certainly upheavals, wartime and whatnot, the person's missing in action for 5 years, they married somebody else because everyone believed he was dead, and he shows up one day. Well, all was done in good faith, but the fact is,
still married to the original.
And those are the kind of things that can't happen. I mean, history, of course, we've got 7 billion people. Everyone has their own life story. So, you know, some things go wrong sometimes. So that's why we have marriage tribunals. But it's not every marriage. It can't be.
No. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about regarding marriage and annulments, especially marriage. Hopefully we'll deal with this topic even more now that this synod is coming up in 2015. And we'll close this program, and we will pick it up next time. Thank you.